Hello and welcome to Prairie Pulse. Joining us on today's show is Melissa Markegard of the Fargo-Cass Public Health. She's the Tobacco Prevention Coordinator. Melissa, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it.
As we get started, tell the folks a little bit about yourself and maybe your background.
Sure. I'm from a small town in Minnesota, so I moved to Fargo for college. So I went to MSUM, and then I got my master's degree at NDSU. And then I started at public health about 5 years ago.
Yeah, so how did you end up with the Fargo-Cass Public Health?
Yep. So I came across the job, and I thought I could do that. And when I started, I always tell people tobacco was relatively boring. It was cigarettes, it was chewing tobacco. People know the dangers of that. They don't feel like they need a whole lot of education. But then e-cigarettes started to come out, and devices like the Juul came on the market, and it has been full-blown education constantly since. So. Okay.
Well, we may talk more about other things, but let's talk about vaping. That seems to be in the news a lot. Talk about some of the hospitalization. Let's just jump right into it with that. Can you talk about nationwide how many cases there are?
Yep. So the CDC updates their website every Thursday. As of last Thursday, there are almost 2,300 cases, confirmed cases of the vaping-related lung injury. There are approximately 48 confirmed deaths in our nation. We do not have any confirmed deaths here in North Dakota, but we do have some confirmed cases.
Yeah. So even though it's a nationwide thing, so there are issues in the Midwest.
Yes. Yeah. Oh yeah. Definitely. Yep. We have seen several cases right even here in Fargo.
Mm-hmm. So why is this happening?
I think this is happening because a couple doctors started to figure out what was actually going on. I think this has been happening for quite some time. We're just knowing what to look for now and letting our medical professionals know what to look for, and so they're reporting it as such.
Is it something being put in maybe from the black market or? There's been talks about that.
Right. Yep. So the CDC's website, they're not blaming one particular device. They're not blaming one particular thing. There are the majority of the confirmed cases of lung injury have used THC or black market THC in them. However, there are cases that report no THC use at all. So then we do have to look at what is specifically in these devices that could potentially be causing this. Some are reporting just nicotine use in their vaping device, and they also have the lung injury. And so the CDC is being very careful to point to particular devices or particular things. The CDC is suggesting no use of do not vape THC, do not vape anything from the black market or for places that you don't know where they came from. Fargo-Cass Public Health is suggesting complete vaping avoidance until we actually know where these products, what specifically is causing these lung injuries. Mm-hmm.
So in your view, or the studies that out there, how dangerous and addictive is vaping?
I think it is. I think it's dangerous. I think we don't know all the health consequences yet because they just haven't been around long enough. But I have a feeling that once they have been around long enough and we have studies to show what actually happens, I think we are going to see some major health issues that stem from these products.
Well, for someone who's never smoked, I heard early on that vaping was an alternative to cigarettes and supposed to be safer.
Right.
Is that true?
So, we look at vaping products just like any other tobacco product. Chewing is not safer than cigarettes. Vaping is not safer than cigarettes. It's an alternative to getting nicotine into your body. It's a different way of doing that. Vape companies are not allowed to say that they are they can be used for cessation. So at Fargo-Cass Public Health, we say the only things that can be used for cessation safely are the things that have been approved by the FDA. And so that's patches, the gum, the lozenges. There's a nasal spray to help you quit smoking. as a cessation. It's been approved by the FDA. There are a couple medications that have been approved by the FDA to help you quit smoking or your tobacco use, so chewing as well. And so right now we're looking at how do we use those approved methods to help people quit vaping, because we do have people who want to quit vaping, but their addiction is very strong. And because of the lack of regulation with vaping, it makes it more challenging to help those people.
Yeah, you mentioned some of the dangers. Are there other health dangers that come with vaping, and are they really just related to cigarette smoking?
So I think really the largest danger that we look at right now, especially with youth, is the addiction component to nicotine, because there's nicotine in these products. There's very high levels of nicotine in these products, and so we're seeing a very strong addiction when youth start using these products.
Mm-hmm. Well, talk about the companies that market this. How do they market it?
So I go into classrooms, I talk to parents, I talk to all sorts of people on a daily basis about this particular thing. And so really we look at product placement, where the products have been placed. We look at the flavors that have been used, and we talk to kids about what are the popular flavors that they have heard about compared to what are the popular flavors that parents have heard about. They're very different. They have been targeted with the ads, especially on social media. They're also targeted when you look at different TV shows and YouTube and all sorts of different, the social media platforms really that youth are on. There's a significant amount of marketing, and right now, because of how much youth are using these products, really we're seeing the companies don't have to really market that much anymore. You know, specifically Juul. Juul says we pulled down our Instagram account. That's great. People are still hashtagging Juul. There's still really free marketing for those companies on those social media platforms.
Mm-hmm. Well, you mentioned Juul a number of times, but who are the companies involved with this? And I understand Juul has like 70+% of the market.
Yes. Yeah, so Juul controls 72% of the e-cigarette market, and that was as of last December. So we're a full year away from that statistic, but Juul is the main guy. Last fall, Juul was purchased, a 35% stake of Juul was purchased for $13 billion by Altria, which is a big tobacco company that also owns Marlboro cigarettes. And so really now we're looking at Juul as a e-cigarette or vaping company that is owned by Altria, which is a big tobacco company.
Mm-hmm. Well, I understand and see that you've brought some examples.
Yes.
I understand you want to talk about them.
Sure.
So
Yeah,
I don't even recognize some of these.
I bet you
I've got a
don't.
watch and a pen here.
Right,
What do we?
Exactly. So really, I'll just focus on a couple. So this is the Juul, and if you pull that off of there, that's the charger, which plugs into a USB, and then it magnetizes to the Juul, and the Juul will magnet in there to charge it. Mm-hmm. So when I do education with parents and teachers, I show them how, it looks like a regular USB. You know, it really blends in. It becomes very discreet when you don't know what you're looking for. And then if you pull out that top part, that is the pod. So that is where the liquid nicotine is, and the other chemicals that they put in that. And then when that is heated up and you inhale, then that is what's vaporized, and you inhale that into your lungs.
You say heated up. Is it heated up with your breath or what heat?
Because you charge it, and so it's charged.
Charging. Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So that's a Juul. That's the top device that people are using, and then we'll talk about the vaping watch too as well. So you just push that button, and the top pops off, and then you have your vaping device right in your watch. The watch works. It tells time. It's extremely discreet because you don't see it. You know, so there are so many people who wear their Fitbits or their Apple Watches. Specifically, this one, even the band is made to look like an Apple Watch band. So if people have an Apple Watch, they know what I'm talking about, because this band looks just like an Apple Watch would.
Okay. So basically you're saying it's much easier to be discreet about you with your
Yes.
devices.
Yep.
Because you've got an ink pen here, or so it looks like.
Yep, it's an ink pen. It writes very well, actually. And you just unscrew that top, and then that becomes your vaping device. So it's becoming extremely difficult for teachers, school resource officers, and parents to see any of these products. A lot of times I carry around a backpack that also has other school supplies in it, and with those school supplies, then everything really blends in because you don't see it. If you don't know what you're looking for, it's extremely hard to see what you're looking at.
Well, again, illegal for teens to participate in this,
Yes.
but this creates a situation where there's no lighter involved, there's no
Right.
smoke involved,
Exactly.
no significant smoke
Yep.
involved.
Yep.
And so, wow. Is vaping regulated?
No. Vaping is not regulated. They can't say that they can be used for cessation, but really that's about it. Here in North Dakota, we, with the individual vape juice, we have a law where it has to have a childproof cap on it. There are a few laws that we have in North Dakota. There are a few laws that we have here in Fargo, or the city ordinances that we have in Fargo and West Fargo, that vape shops have to follow and that other people selling vapes have to follow. But other than that, the FDA has not stepped in to regulate as far as advertising goes, as far as nicotine content and all of that kind of stuff. None of that has been regulated.
Well, maybe back up just a moment. So what is the basic law of vaping? Does it follow cigarette smoking? I mean, it's considered a
Yes.
tobacco product.
Yep. So here in North Dakota, you have to be 18 years of age or older to purchase them, just like cigarettes. They're included in our statewide smoke-free law. So you cannot vape indoors. You can't vape in restaurants. You can't vape in bars. That's all illegal. You can't vape 20 feet. You have to be 20 feet or more from the doors, just like cigarettes. So here in North Dakota, wherever you can't smoke a cigarette, you also cannot vape. So that's North Dakota law. In the nation, it's 18. You have to be 18. So that doesn't mean that we don't have 18-year-olds using it or people under the age of 18 using it. We've seen those numbers skyrocket.
Do you think you've seen, cigarettes through the years, obviously that's been documented,
Yep.
and teens still got to cigarettes. Do teens have, you feel like, easier access with the vaping? Or?
I do feel like teen access to vaping it has to be pretty easy, just because of the usage that we're seeing, the numbers that we're seeing of youth using these products. The access, for whatever reason, is pretty easy, and I think a lot of that does stem from social media.
Yeah, because that, do you have surveys regarding how many teens have actually tried vaping?
Yes. Yep. So the brand new youth risk behavior survey for North Dakota just was released earlier this week, and we've known the numbers for a few weeks. But in North Dakota in 2017, teen vaping was around 22%, 21%, and now in 2019 that has jumped to 33%. So it's been a significant jump. When you talk to teens about what they feel the numbers are, they actually guess it much higher than 33%. And I think that's because they do see it a lot. They're exposed to it all the time. And when you talk to them about social media, they see it on their social media, and I think that kind of lends to them thinking that the numbers are quite a bit higher than what they're at. But 33% is pretty significant. Cigarette smoking in North Dakota high schoolers in 2019 was at 8%. So we are at 33% and 8%. So that's a pretty significant difference.
So why is that?
I think it's because we've done a really good job of educating on cigarettes. Cigarettes, like you mentioned before, you have to light it. You have to go outside. It smells. When you talk to youth about cigarette smoking, they say, "Oh, gross. Ew, that stinks. That's yuck. No, I would never do that." And you talk to them about vaping, and they all have a friend who vapes. They all know the flavors that are popular. It's just it's like it's become more accepted. Mm-hmm. It's not gross. It doesn't smell bad.
What are some of the flavors?
Well, so So flavors, really when I talk to kids about flavors, in the top 4 always mentioned are mint and mango, which really seems odd. You know, mint and mango, why are they mentioned by youth of all people? Mint and mango are the most popular Jewel pods, which really lends to, okay, Jewel knows what they're doing when they're marketing. If you talk to a room full of parents and ask them what the most popular kid flavors are, they say cotton candy, bubble gum, gummy bear, that type of thing. And in reality, those aren't the most popular. The kids know what the most popular ones are, mint and mango. Parents never, ever say mint and mango, ever. So it's really interesting that the kids know what the popular flavors are, even though they're not real obvious to anyone else, that mint and mango, why would anyone ever guess mint and mango? But the kids know it, so it's very interesting.
Yeah. You know, we talked about regulations. When do you think regulations might come into place?
Hey, your guess is as good as mine as far as when the FDA could potentially do that. You know, we've heard spring of 2020, but they've kind of switched around those years. They've gone from 2022 back to 2018. Well, that came and went, and we don't have any regulations. So we'll see. Hopefully soon.
Maybe the disconnect on flavors, but what should parents do if they suspect their teen is vaping?
I think they should educate themselves, you know, take a look, go to our website, FargoCast Public Health. You know, if you Google FargoCast Public Health e-cigarettes, it brings you right to our page. We put all new information up there as soon as we get it. We have a couple of really good videos, educational, as far as what parents should look for, and then with a couple of our school resource officers and myself kind of talking about what we're seeing in the high schools and the middle schools. Really just educating and knowing what you're looking for, and then if you do see something, taking it away. You know, I mean, when I educate teachers, I had a teacher who had seen this fall out of someone's backpack right in front of him, and he didn't know what it was. He thought it was a makeup compact, and so he gave it back to the student. And he said, never again, that's not happening, because now he knows what he's looking for. And so really that's sheer education and knowing what you're looking for and making sure that you are taking those devices and products as you find them.
Yeah. So should the vaping companies, you know, be accountable for the health issues that, especially these serious ones?
You know, I think the CDC needs to do. You know, they're still looking at it. We're in the very infancy of the vaping-related lung injury to know where it's coming from, what is actually happening, and so I think we'll see some of that eventually down the road. But for right now, we don't, because it's not solid. This is what's causing it. This is what's causing it. We just have to kind of go with treating it and trying to get people to realize that there could be very significant dangers in using.
Yeah, and you
products.
say in infancy. Maybe you said this earlier. How long has vaping been around in this? Not necessarily these devices, but how long has vaping been?
Probably over 10 years here in the U.S. But it was very new when it first started, and really no one had seen it. And now it has just become this really, initially when it started, it was the bigger devices, the heavier devices. You mentioned it's really heavy, those types of devices. And now it has really, if you go on any vaping website where they're trying to sell the products, you will notice they use words like discreet, easy to hide, easy to conceal, which really, to me, at Public Health, like, adults don't need to conceal it. Adults don't need to hide it. It's a legal product for adults to use. So the discreet portion of it really, I question the marketing of the discreet words and that type of thing.
So, and where does sort of the personal responsibility fall in this aspect of vaping?
You know, I think adults are adults, and they are going to make their own decisions regardless of if it's a legal product, if it's illegal. I mean, adults make their own decisions. I think as far as youth go, it's really important for parents to understand that this could have very significant health implications. when cigarettes first came out and youth were using them, I mean, we now know what the significant health implications are of that. We can't wait 4 or 5 decades to know for sure. We just have to really be very aware and very cautious of using these products.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, we've talked about cigarettes off and on here. Let's turn back to cigarettes. Mm-hmm. It seems like, of course, decades of studies and warning of the dangers has had some effect. Mm-hmm. It seems like. Are less people smoking now?
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yep. Smoking is really gone down in numbers drastically, and I think, I think that is obvious, with the big tobacco company Altria, with them purchasing a 35% stake in Juul, in an e-cigarette company, and the most popular e-cigarette company. I think, Altria sees their products not being utilized as much by youth, not being started by youth as much as they used to, and if they don't have people starting to use their products, eventually they run out of customers if no one's starting to use their product. However, they saw that as well and bought into Juul, so because Juul has lots of customers.
Yeah. So how are cigarette companies, tobacco companies in this respect? Who are they marketing to? Because of the master settlement agreement several years ago with the lawsuit of the 4 largest tobacco companies, their marketing is very, they can't do a whole lot, with cigarettes and chewing tobacco. Vaping does not fall under the master settlement agreement, and so it's if you see a Juul advertisement, that doesn't fall under the master settlement agreement. The regulations for vaping products is very different than that of cigarettes and chewing tobacco. Do you think vaping may one day fall under that? I really wish it would. Yeah, I wish it would, because then you wouldn't see so many commercials for vaping products that really seem to target a younger generation or the younger adults. You wouldn't see some of these other things that big tobacco really isn't allowed to do with their other products, but can do with their vaping products. Yeah, so you talked about adults, and you say 33%, I believe, of teens are vaping or have tried vaping. Yep. Which is it? I forget. It has vaped in the last 30 days. Okay, in the last 30 days. Admits to have vaping in the last 30 days. Yep. But do you see studies where adults are turning to vaping instead of smoking cigarettes? So we know that there are adults that are trying to use vapes to help them quit smoking. What we also know is that the nicotine content in some of these products is extremely high, and so if vaping doesn't help them, if they continue to vape, a lot of times they end up going back to also cigarette smoking, so then they become what we call a dual user. And then, there are situations where maybe vaping isn't for them, so they go back to cigarette smoking, and now they're smoking more because they were getting a lot of nicotine with their vaping device. So it's really, we don't know enough about vaping devices, and they're not regulated. And so the nicotine content in them could be very high. You could be vaping a 0 milligram vape juice, or so you think it's a 0 milligram vape juice. And studies are being done that show that those 0 milligram vape juices many times do have nicotine in them. If they have nicotine in them, they're addictive. You talked about different bans, and do you have any idea about the smoking ban? What the impact has been by not smoking in buildings? Mm-hmm. Here in North Dakota, well, yeah. It should be nationwide, but here in North Dakota. Here in North Dakota, we have one of the strongest smoke-free laws in the nation, because ours does include vaping products, and we have that 20-foot rule, which not every state it has, which is wonderful. North Dakota is very proud of that particular law, and we just actually had the anniversary of that law last week, actually. But we hear lots of anecdotal, we really like this law. Can you imagine if we didn't have this law? Can you imagine going back to having to say smoking or non in restaurants, or doing all of those, or smelling like smoke after you go eat or go out and have a drink at night? So, we hear that
that smoke-free law is extremely popular, and we do need to protect that law as much as possible.
Yeah. What about how addicting cigarettes are? Can you talk just a little bit about how, once someone's tried them and started smoking, how addictive are they?
Nicotine is the addictive product and the addictive component in all of these products. So chewing, cigarettes, vaping devices, nicotine is where the addiction lies. And I think whatever you're using, you have the potential to become addicted very quickly.
Okay. Well, Melissa, if people would like more information about this, where can they go? Who can they contact?
Yep, FargoCast Public Health, our website, we update it as regularly as we can with new information, different information. We also have cessation, and so if you are wanting to quit vaping or chewing or smoking, we have a cessation program. There's North Dakota Quits, which is the free telephone quitting line. So there's lots of options in the FargoCast Public Health, our website.
Okay. Well, Melissa, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you very much for having me.
Well, that's all we have on Prairie Pulse for this week. And as always, thanks for watching.
Funded by the members of Prairie Public.